You're listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast, celebrating hunting dog heritage, competition, and community. United Kennel Club has been the hunting dog sports home for coonhounds, beagles, retrievers, pointers, cur, feist, and more for over 125 years.
We're going to start out here right at the beginning. This is going to be Rule 1, and that's honor rules. First sentence here is going to read, before beginning a hunt, a deadline time for completion of hunt will be announced and time posted in plain view of all hunters. The deadline time of hunt and return of scorecard to hunt master or the hunt director shall be indicated on the scorecard. Host Club has the option of conducting 60, 90, or 120-minute hunts. Hunting time must be the same for all cast and must be announced.
Yep, that's very important that the hunters know how much time they're obviously going to hunt, and that's what this very first rule starts with that. So even before the beginning of the hunt, that's something that is, as you know, Trevor, has been a long-standing rule for UKC events when they announce or post the deadline. You might not see that as much maybe anymore, and I don't know that it's quite as significant anymore, but the one place it is very important to make sure they post it, and that is on the scorecard itself. And that's the official's responsibility to make sure that's on there. And anytime a judge picks up a scorecard or hunters notice that it may not be noted on the scorecard, I would advise them to just turn around right away and go make sure the official puts it on there if they fail to. Sometimes it's just an inadvertent mistake if they don't have it on there, but it should be posted and for sure on the scorecard, so there's no question. They have the option, like you mentioned here, 60, 90, or 120-minute hunts, and these are decided on the day of. They're not advertised like some of our UKC's other events. They are actually decided on the day of. And again, it must be announced, and they read a master hounds or a hunt director checklist. And that's where also they announce to the cast how long their hunts are gonna be. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, never leave the clubhouse without knowing how long you're hunting or when you need to be back.
Good point.
Next sentence goes on to say, all hunters, judges, and or guides must be drawn publicly for their cast.
That's a good one right there. And what that means publicly doesn't necessarily mean that you, the participant, can come up there and just be, right over top of the table. It's basically meant to that you're not doing the draw behind closed doors, etc. It's just out in the open, shows that there's nothing to hide here, it should be a fair, impartial draw, and that there's if you do it behind closed doors, you wouldn't know how they came about with that. Just do it out in the open. We've those of us that have been to a lot of hunts, we see what the draw kind of looks like, and it is not necessarily intended. And here's what participants would always encourage them to: don't be disrespectful of them drawing casts and be right up on top of it. Sometimes you're just in the way when you do that. That is not the intent of having a public draw.
Next sentence reads, owners having multiple entries will have dogs drawn on separate casts if possible. Dogs to be drawn to the fewest casts possible.
Yeah, that means if there's an owner, I may have 2 dogs entered in the event. And that is so my 2 dogs don't draw out against each other. That's they will be put on separate casts if possible. Now, the only time it would not be possible if there's not enough casts to accommodate that for me. In other words, let's just make it real easy. Let's say, just for real easy, let's say they're drawn out in 3-dog casts. I have 2 dogs, and it's just my 2 dogs, and you're the only other entry there. That would only be 1 cast. So we can't make 2 casts just so we can separate one of my dogs. And then I'll go beyond that is if, let's say there's 2 casts available, that's all that we're going to have. We only have 6 dogs in the event, and I have 3 of those dogs in the 6 dogs total. I have 3 of them. That doesn't mean we're going to create 3 casts and all be 2-dog casts. And I also don't get to determine which one of my, obviously, one can be on a separate cast. 2 of them are going to have to draw out together, and that is the official does a drawing to determine who goes on what.
Just a blind draw.
A blind draw. I can't say, hey, Mr. Huntmaster, I want this dog on this cast by itself and put these two together. Doesn't work like that. And then the drawing to the fewest cast, or dogs to be drawn to the fewest cast possible. That means just exactly that. You know, if you have 9 dogs, we're going to have 9 or 3 casts.
No.
That's the fewest possible.
It continues here by saying all dogs, including champions, to hunt entire hunt time unless scratched.
Yeah, and that's just as, you know, we talked about how much time they have, 60, 90, or 120 minutes. In order to be considered a cast winner, you have to have hunted the whole time. You can't just, let's say a couple dogs withdraw or something like that, or get scratched and you're the only dog left after, let's say you have a 90-minute hunt, and after 60 minutes, you're the only dog left. You're still required to hunt your full 90 minutes without scratching yourself or going out the back door. You still have to hunt the whole time to be considered a cast winner.
And the last couple sentences there of the first paragraph of honor rules tells us casts are not to be drawn until after entries close at the listed deadline. Those in entry line at deadline time will be entered.
Yeah, so obviously I think that should probably go without saying, not to start drawing casts. And that is, you know, you wait until the deadline is up to make sure you have everybody in and everybody gets into the draw as they should, and not to start drawing casts before that. You know, so sometimes I say not to start drawing casts. Sometimes, you know, the procedure, we're going to talk about this later in this series, you know, probably the procedure for drawing casts or recommended procedure. Sometimes and that's going to start, we would always recommend that you select your judges first. So just to be sure, when you have all the judges you know you're going to use for the day, that doesn't mean you can't start having a judge stuck on a card before, you know, the deadline, you know, while you're waiting for the deadline. That's not going to change the draw in any, or affect the draw in any way like that. But as far as anything else, yeah, you would need to wait. Make sure you got everybody in that's going to be there before the deadline to get them all in the draw.
And then there's a really small second paragraph there, but it has a lot to offer here.
Well, hey, one more thing before you go on that I want to mention here. Those in entry line at deadline time will be entered. So that means, let's say the deadline is 7 a.m. At 7 a.m., the hunt master should announce that deadline is up. At that point, anybody that is in line at that point when the deadline occurred should be allowed entry into the event still. If you were filling out your slip, you're in line, yada, yada. But if you're coming through the door, and I've already made that announcement, and boom, now seconds later or what have you, you come through the door, the deadline has already occurred. You're not in line, you are not in line, and there's no exceptions to that. That's one thing UKC has been very strict on for a lot of years and continues to be, and that is deadlines, whether it's the entry deadline, return deadline, or any deadlines for that matter. If your entry will be refused if you were not in line at the time when the deadline occurred. And if the deadline is 7 o'clock, that doesn't mean you have a window until it's 7:01. When it's 7 o'clock, the official should announce that deadline is here, and that's deadline there.
Next to here, it says all events will be run as a combined entry unless specified to be a breed-specific hunt.
Yeah, no, that is what that means is there's in Feist events, there's treeing Feist and mountain Feist, and it doesn't matter the breed. They'll all be mixed up based on, there's a couple different hunt formats. There's a standard hunt format where you do separate all the registered dogs that don't have titles yet. They all go into one pool, and those dogs are drawn out together. And then the other pool is all the champions and grand champions. They go into the second category. They're all drawn out together and compete against each other, but they are not separated by treeing and mountain Feist in this case. So unless it's a breed-specific event, and that is the Treeing Feist Association. They have their annual Feist Day event where they may have a treeing Feist only
Gotcha.
category. And same with the Mountain Feist Association. They might have at their annual breed day hunts, they are allowed to have a Mountain Feist only hunt. But that doesn't apply to your standard hunt format or at the local club.
Yep.
Those draw out together outside of, and they draw out based on their titles. Registered in one category, champs and grands in the other category.
And it finishes by saying any one dog cast requires a non-hunting judge be assigned to that cast.
Yeah, that doesn't happen that often, but every now and then it does. It might be weather related or what have you. And for whatever reason, if you do have a one dog cast, that dog may hunt. There was a time in UKC years and years ago when one dog casts were disallowed, uh, but it's always considered this, and it's a little more friendly. If I go somewhere, I can't help if I'm the only dog there. It's not. There might be some other issues to look at if there is something, if there is an issue, or a reason why there's not any more dogs there. But we still allow that dog to go out and compete and hunt for the whole amount of time that's designated for this hunt. But they have to have a non-hunting judge assigned to that cast. So there you go. I don't know. I don't think I have anything more to add there. Section 1 is fairly simple, but those are kind of that's the start of the hunt right there, and rules that apply to that. Got anything to add to it?
No, I think you covered that pretty well.
All right.
Rule 2, which is titled Handlers. It starts out here with a little sentence or two. Says, the handler's duties are to know their dog's voice and nature. Also, to advise judge of any of the dog's peculiarities before hunt begins, and to tell judge when dog trees.
That might be the toughest rule or word in the rule book right there.
That word doesn't go with my slang at all.
Yeah. What that means is the handler's duty to know their dog's voice, and that is, obviously if you compete, we have to call our own dogs. We call them struck, or in this case, for Feist and current Feist events, they don't call them struck when they open. They only call them when they're treed. So I need to know my dog's voice. I need to know when to call it, when it is my dog, and to be able to identify it. So that is one of my duties, one of my responsibilities as a handler, to actually know my dog's voice. So I can pass that information on to the judge and let him know when the dog opens or when it's treated, etc. One thing you will hear judges ask a lot before the event or before the hunt starts is, hey, is there anything I need to know about your dogs that you want to tell me before we turn them loose? And a peculiarity might be, hey, when we get up to the tree, a common one anyways is, hey, my dog may meet me off the tree a little bit when we come into the tree, or I don't know, maybe whatever it might be. Some dogs are, have different peculiarities. And so whatever that might be, I might tell the judge before we turn loose and they ask. That's all that means.
Rule 2A reads, it is the handler's ultimate responsibility to know the rules and abide by rules and the decisions of the judge, hunt master, hunt director, and question panel.
Yeah, kind of goes hand in hand. Everybody needs to know their position, their responsibilities. It's the handler's responsibility to not just know their dogs. They should also be somewhat familiar with the rules. They should know the rules, and it's one thing we can sit here. We always talk about this. It's one thing to read the rules through. You also have to go out there and apply them to the situations you get into. So, but know the rules, and you obviously have to abide by the rules. There's the rules for most any game, whether it's playing baseball, football, ping pong, or in this case, hunting in a Feist hunt. There's rules to go by. Need to know them. You need to abide by those rules, and you need to know that the judge makes their decisions. Judges need to know the rules even more than the non-judges do, I guess, so to speak. The hunt master knows his role, his or her role, as far as conducting the event, being the official, or whether you're a hunt director. And if you are asked to serve on a question panel, you need to also be familiar with the rules and qualified for that. A question panel is if the club uses a hunt director and you bring a question in, it goes to a 3-person panel. So obviously, if I bring a question back, I would want the panel to be familiar with the rules and well acquainted and make an educated ruling on my question.
Absolutely. Always tell people you don't have to know them word for word, but at least know where to find them.
That's right.
Rule 2B says a handler must always conduct himself or herself in a sportsmanlike manner. A handler becoming loud, aggressive, or belligerent may be scratched regardless of the merit of his or her argument. A handler displaying unsportsmanlike conduct or failing to abide by those rules shall be reported to the hunt director, Refer to misconduct guidelines found on website.
Yeah, I think that's a mouthful right there, and it's one we definitely need. And I think in like any sport, any competition, sometimes we get pretty passionate about whatever that might be. We do the same thing here. We have some people seem to be more passionate or might respond a little or more passionately, so to speak, and sometimes even go overboard and maybe cross a line that we shouldn't go there and conduct ourselves inappropriately. So we have things in place that you can't do that. The other thing I want to say about that is sometimes we don't always agree with a call that is being made in the woods or a situation, whether it's a call that's made by a human or it's maybe just because our dog is not performing the way we'd like to see it or what have you. But when it comes to not agreeing with a call, we have procedures in place that we'll talk about in this series, how to deal with those and the procedures for those. But one of them is you don't need to go beyond that line that we're talking about of being unsportsmanlike. If you do that, it doesn't matter how right you may be. All that doesn't matter at that point. And not just that, if you're not careful, you might get an extensive timeout and not be able to compete. In other words, be suspended if you're not careful with your actions.
Absolutely.
We can resolve issues without being belligerent and loud and getting aggressive and unsportsmanlike.
Rule 2C tells us any handler found guilty of interfering with another handler's dog in any way that would affect their ability to compete may be subject to disciplinary action.
Yeah, I think that's pretty self-explanatory there. I just couldn't get in the way of your dog or anything like that, when we're out there competing, or I don't know, there's different things, try to manipulate your dog or try to influence your dog to come over here or what have its ability to compete or anything like that, so it could be a variable of various things, I guess. But yeah, I can't get in the way of your dog. Can't catch it and stuff like that, And if I do something like that that is deemed detrimental or we talked about unsportsmanlike conduct or what have you, then I could be subjected to a lot more than just being scratched from the hunt at that point.
Rule 2D tells us a handler may not encourage, discourage, scold, or discipline their dog during the cast. This includes the use of hand signals to control the dog. Praising a handled dog is not considered encouraging. Refer to Rule 13Q if applicable.
Yeah, I think that's also very self-explanatory. As far as encouraging or discouraging, scolding or anything like that, and an example of that might be once the hunt clock is on, our dogs have to go hunting on their own. We can't encourage them. In other words, we've cut them. At this point, I just got to watch my dog and hopefully it'll go like it's supposed to. I can't sit there and say, come on, let's go hunt them up, hunt them up, hunt them up. That doesn't work. It might work at home during training season or pleasure hunting, but it's not going to work here in competition. One of the things is we have rules for dogs that don't hunt, that there's going to be a no hunt clock put on them. And if X amount of time goes by that they don't hunt on their own without being influenced, there's penalties for that. So whether it's encouraging or maybe even discouraging, let's say a dog's going for, I don't know, going somewhere where you don't want it to go, or maybe there's a deer that jumped up. It got its attention and it's headed over that way. I can't sit there and hey, no, chili, no,
Yeah, that's right.
So scold or discipline a dog, and I think sometimes when we find as far as disciplining is when a dog maybe trees off game or does something, that is during the hunt. Training should be during training season, not at a competition. So we can't discipline our dogs either. Hand signals, can't use that. Praising a handled dog is not considered encouraging. And oftentimes when you see praising is when the dog makes a tree. We've got our dog declared treed. We go in to handle them. There's nothing wrong with petting Chili a couple times on the side. Hey, good job. Yeah. That's not encouraging or discouraging. Little bit of praise is perfectly fine.
That's right.
On a handled dog, it says.
Yeah, and I'm guessing Rule 13 is the no good rule. And
I
we'll
would
get to
say
that
so.
later on.
13 is going to be, sometimes we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think section 13 is a whole lot of ugly.
So Rule 2E continues here. A handler may not leave the cast without permission from the judge for any reason. The judge may give a handler permission to leave the cast to search for their dog during timeout. Judge may grant permission for a handler to go to their dog on a separate tree after the tree is closed, or if all dogs are declared treed, handled, or hunt time expires.
Yeah, I think you being the coonhound guy and having a lot of experience there, you can tell me exactly what happens or what happens a lot when casts get separated.
Bad things.
Bad things happen when casts get separated. So yeah, a handler can't just up and leave the cast. They have to. There's a judge that's assigned to the cast. They are in charge, and with the judge's permission, they may go leave the cast to search for their dog during timeout. Obviously, we got timeout. We all need to go handle our dogs, and at that time, obviously, you can leave the cast, and you obviously have to. Or the judge may also grant you permission to go handle your dog on a split tree after your tree is closed, and if all dogs are declared treed, handled, or hunt time expires, things like that, But outside of that, don't leave the cast. Stay with the cast at all times unless granted permission.
There is one exception here in E that I wanted to read as well. It says handlers may not be granted permission or leave the cast while search time is running during the scoring of a tree to go handle a dog on a split tree.
Yep. You're also very familiar. We have that rule in other tree dog sports. Coonhounds is one where the same rule applies. And the reason for that is, hey, we need, it takes a majority to see the squirrel to be able to plus it. So that's just a courtesy thing. If we're in the process of searching a tree, so there's a couple things that happen in search time. A dog is handled at the tree, there's a clock, a search clock, which is a 5-minute clock. We have 5 minutes to search a tree. And at that point, we need to have all of our cast members there to help search. And I don't want to be sending somebody away. We want to give this dog all the opportunity to score plus points here. We need everybody here. So at that point, the judge will not give anybody permission, even if the dog is sitting off to the side, not even very far away. It doesn't matter. Distance doesn't matter. When they are searching, there's not going to be any permission granted for a handler to go handle a dog.
It's a big respect thing as well.
It is, sure.
Somebody's shine time or search time, stay there and help out. Continues on here. 2F under handlers tells us each handler is encouraged to remain with the cast for the entire hunt, even though his or her dog may not be a part of the cast. Cast members retain voting obligations if dog is withdrawn or scratched. And there is an exception to that. If handler is scratched for misconduct, that handler loses all voting privileges.
Yeah, and there again, that's just another courtesy thing. Even though sometimes our dogs it's not their day. They maybe take some minus points. We are just out of it. There's no chance we can win. We just decide, hey, I'm just going to withdraw my dog. Or let's say maybe my dog's scratched. Either way. But even then, I put my dog up. I'm no longer competing. My dog is not competing in the cast, but I am still an active cast member, and I should stay with the cast. And part of that, as we talked about, it takes a majority to plus a tree to find the squirrel. In the 3-dog cast, that means 2 of us have to see the squirrel, and that's just a courtesy to help the other dogs that are still in it to score and such, and just stay with the cast. Just the right thing to do. The only exception is, as it says here, is if I were to get scratched for unsportsmanlike conduct or something like that, then guess what? I don't think the cast needs or wants me there, and I lose all voting privileges at that point too, and I should not be around anymore.
Yeah, that vote may be a little swayed.
Yeah, exactly. So there you go.
Rule 2G says, if permitted, a handler is allowed no more than 3 spectators. See Rule 4. Handlers' dogs will be scratched for rule violations by their spectators.
Yeah, so one thing that is unique with Kerr and Feist events, at the start of the event in the morning before casts are drawn, the hunt director or the hunt master they'll bring that up. They'll discuss that, and if whether or not they're going to allow spectators. Frankly, most of the time spectators are allowed. very few events that I've seen where they didn't allow any spectators. They'll decide that in the morning, but if they do allow it and it's approved, then no more than 3 spectators per handler. So you and I are handlers. I could have 3 spectators that are under my umbrella, so to speak. You could have no more than 3. And the thing is, we don't want to have too many people out in the woods either. I can tell you, if you know anything about squirrel hunting, especially when their woods are hit pretty hard, why squirrels are going to get pretty antsy when there's a bunch of people coming towards their tree. So too many sometimes is just too many. But spectators are also good, but they can in no shape or form get involved with any scoring discussions or anything like that in the woods. That is all left up to the judge and the handlers on the cast. But they are spectators. That is all they are. And probably a little more limited than a spectator at a baseball game or something. We can sit there and yell at the players or yell at the ump or the opposing coach or what have you, but here, no, you don't have very much. You're just watching, watching. Keep your mouth shut and your eyes open. That's about the extent of it right there. Otherwise, and if you do, it tells you could get if any of my spectators get out of line, start getting involved in discussions when they shouldn't, subjects me to my dog being scratched. Talked about that. Section 13. I think we're going to talk about the ugly part of that at some point.
Yeah, and now to finish up the handler section, we have Rule 2H, and that tells us it is the handler's responsibility to check time and score before signing scorecard.
Yep, and that's just something that you do mandatory, and that's just common practice at the end of the hunt. You've got your dog handled, gathered back up, you're back of the truck. Oftentimes, oftentimes, not always, sometimes they do it in the woods at the last tree that's made or right when hunt time expires, but sometimes the judge will wait until they get all the dogs handled back out to the trees, got all the scores tallied up and everything, or might have all the values on it as they went, and goes back to the truck, wherever that is, where they add up everything, see who won the cast and all this and that. It's at that point, and the handlers all have to sign the scorecard. But before you do, they should always check the time that that they hunted the correct amount of time, and also that their scores all add up. Everything is added up correctly. Hey, we got humans involved, and sometimes there's a mathematical error somewhere. Make sure you check on that, because after you sign it, for the most part, that is a signed scorecard, and no changes can be made. So it's no good to go back to the club. It's not going to do you any good to go back to the club and say, well, I thought we scored this differently back there, or what have you, or that wasn't correct, or this or that. Do it before you sign it. Make sure everything looks correct. So, you got anything to add to this section?
I think that's all for Rule 2.
There you go. With Eukanuba, stamina is the one difference I'm seeing. When I'm running hair up north, my dogs will put on 10, 12, 15 miles of solid running, and they just don't tire as easily or as quickly. Oftentimes, my work schedule does not allow me to have the desired physical conditioning on my dogs, but even then, as many as 25 or more miles a day of hard running is just another day in the office. To me, it's been apparent Eukanuba's 30-20 sport formula is making that difference. Eukanuba, the official performance dog nutrition partner of UKC.
Rule 3, which talks about judges and guides. And again, here it starts with a little paragraph before we get into the numbers. And it starts out saying, clubs have the option to use non-hunting judges for any or all categories. One or the other may be used on all casts within a given division. Non-hunting judge may be assigned to any cast at the discretion of hunt master and or club officials, if deemed necessary. Cast members do not have the authority to designate or assign a non-hunting judge to their cast. The authority of the judge ceases when the scorecard is turned in to the hunt master.
Yeah, so basically all that's saying is that clubs do have the option to use hunting judges, which is the most popular and what most clubs use. But they could technically use all non-hunting judges if they so chose to do so and had enough qualified judges to do that. That'd be fine. I think most guys, there's nothing better than having a a qualified non-hunting judge, so long as they're qualified and are capable. But most of them, most of the events you're going to go to, you're going to see hunting judges. But it also goes on to say that a non-hunting judge may be assigned to any cast at the discretion of the hunt officials or club officials if deemed necessary. And that's just to kind of cover, if there's a problem individual, whether it's before the start, we just know this guy is just always a problem, and it just is not maybe not good to hunt with, or just need a good strong non-hunting judge. They can in fact do that just on one cast, or let's say sometimes it happens if a question comes back and the official says, like, maybe for various reasons, maybe he recognizes that based on the question or the situation comes in, that what, this judge and this whole cast is maybe a little weak, and maybe different reasons for why they may choose to, and they can, let's say a cast comes in and I'm just like, wow, nobody is doing nobody really knows, and this is just not a very good situation. I've got Joe over here who's an excellent judge. Joe, can you finish judging this cast as a non-hunting judge? So they have that authority. They can do that. And then the other note here that is very important here: cast members don't have the authority to designate or assign a non-hunting judge to their cast. So, and it happens sometimes you're out in the parking lot, you've drawn your cast out, you might be out there and you have this guy as a spectator, for instance, that for whatever reason, maybe the cast is, I don't know, whoever the hunting judge is like, doesn't really want to do it, and maybe there's talk about that. I'm just thinking of some things over the years that you hear. It happens sometimes.
Absolutely.
I'm just giving an example. And somebody says, well, how about we just let Joe here be our non-hunting judge, and we'll take all that away. Everybody agree? It doesn't matter. We don't have that authority, is what this rule says. We can't do that. Only the officials can assign a non-hunting judge. And then we talked about the judge. He has complete authority and is in charge of the cast. Their authority starts when they get the scorecard at the club, and then it goes on to say the authority of the judge ceases when they turn the card in at the end of the hunt.
Yep.
Simple enough.
Yeah, and there's a couple different sections here. We'll start out with the section pertaining to non-hunting judges. And number 1, it says the non-hunting judge has complete authority and is responsible for making all decisions, including the scoring of all trees, calling time out, and whether or not a tree has been previously scored.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. I think when you have a non-hunting judge, there's no voting involved at all. If I don't agree with a call that's made, there's a procedure we'll get into in a minute here, but the non-hunting judge has all complete authority, makes all decisions, even those that go directly to a majority of the cast vote using a hunting judge. But that's it.
Yeah. Number 2 here is a little lengthy, so we might break it down a little bit, but it says here, the decision of the non-hunting judge may be questioned in the field at the time the decision is made or a call that is not being made.
Yep, that's it. So if we don't agree with a call, if I'm a handler out there, I can question his call, and nobody's going to vote. Hopefully the judge will discuss it a little bit, maybe try to resolve it with me if I have a question, or if I'm the judge, I think I want to kind of let you know why I'm making the ruling. Hopefully resolve it. We talked about sportsmanship in another section of the rule book already, so we want to make sure we're doing it the way we should, not get bent out of shape, I guess, so to speak. But yeah, and the other thing is the rules are on the back of the scorecards. Oftentimes I can turn that scorecard over and maybe show the rule as it is written that I think applies to the situation, why I'm making this ruling. But other than that, it is my and there's another part here that is that says maybe question in the field at the time the decision is made. That's kind of key when it comes to procedures. If I don't agree with a call or a call that's not being made, I need to bring it up right at that point, not 5 or 10 minutes later when we get back to the truck or after the hunt. I need to do it then and there.
Yeah. So if you don't agree with a call or a call the judge makes or doesn't make for that matter, it goes on to say it will be scored with a question mark and taken to the hunt master or hunt director after the hunt is over, unless it involves a dog being scratched from the hunt.
Yeah. So let's say I brought up the question with the official or with the judge here at this point. Hopefully we can get it resolved without taking it further. If not, I'm going to ask to put a question mark on the scorecard, and that should end it right there. No need to discuss it further. And then we will take it back to the hunt master or the hunt director after our hunt is over. And that's not to disrupt the hunt, having to call timeout, gather up dogs, go back and forth. All that is not necessary. All those questions can be resolved after our hunt is over. The only way it couldn't is if it involves a dog being scratched from the hunt at that point. But just need to be reasonable.
It goes on to say the non-hunting judge's decision cannot be overturned in the field by a majority vote of cast members.
Yep, there we talked about there is no voting or anything like that. So even if everybody else in the cast agreed with me when I questioned the judge, that doesn't really matter. So it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter at all, actually. So yeah, it just goes to say it doesn't matter what anybody else says. The judge makes that call.
If a question has not been satisfactorily resolved by the decision of the hunt master, a panel may be formed for a $10 fee. And in parentheses, it says, this is the first step when utilizing the hunt director format.
Yeah, so that means after our hunt's over, we're going to take a question back to the hunt master. If they're there, so the club has two. They can use or choose to use a hunt master, and that's the licensed official, or you can use the hunt director format, which is a non-licensed official. In the case of a hunt master, if a question comes back, that person rules on the question by themselves. They hear it, they make their ruling. If there's a hunt director, the non-licensed event official, it goes directly to a panel. Now, the hunt master may sit on this panel, and that's a panel of 3 individuals that will listen to it. But whenever it goes to the panel, there's a panel fee of $10. And I can tell you, it's not about the money for it. It's just to discourage any frivolous, all out effort to see if he can get somebody, or I can get somebody on my side to rule in my favor here.
Yeah.
So, and that $10, I don't know. Yeah, $10.
Yeah, cut
That,
down.
and that's the first step if they use a hunt master.
Hopefully cut down on some silly questions.
And it
that way.
does. It does.
Yeah.
Sure does.
Then it goes on to say, if a handler is still not satisfied, the appeal procedure must be followed. All appeals must be filed immediately after the panel has ruled and must be accompanied by a $20 fee.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit before already about procedures in place, for this here, we're talking about a non-hunting judge. We'll talk about it a little bit more. Again, it's the same thing. Procedure applies whether you're using a hunting judge as well when it comes to a panel and then an appeal. So if I don't agree with the panel decision, or if when I say I don't agree, probably if I had the question, there's already a reason I don't agree for whatever that reason might be. But I think also should be considerate and reasonable, that I would always encourage somebody that has a question or is questioning somebody, have a rule that you feel strongly about is being misapplied.
Right.
If it's just a judgment call or this or that, whether if a dog left, maybe I got minus for my dog leaving a tree, or maybe a tree got minus. I don't know. That's a judgment call. Anybody that was on the panel was not out there, to see that. To ask somebody that wasn't there to see or hear something, that's not fair. And 99% of the time, they're not going to rule with anybody other than the majority without good reason. So a lot of times, you're just spinning your wheels, wasting your time and everybody else's. And oftentimes, quite frankly, you're kind of making yourself look like a fool because it's a judgment call. If they're not out there to see it, why are you asking somebody that wasn't there to see it or hear it? And then the last step is an appeal to UKC. And at that point, there's paperwork that becomes involved now. And that paperwork requires all of the panel's information, who it was with their numbers, and everybody on the cast with their phone numbers and the reason, and then a fee of $20. Then that gets submitted to UKC, who then calls all those folks, gets to the bottom of it, reviews the situation, and then they make the final call on it. And if they are correct, they get that panel fee back, or that appeal fee back. Yep. So there, that kind of, I think, covers when we're talking about a non-hunting judge situation.
Yeah. So we'll segue into the hunting judge situation here. And we'll start out with number 1 under that. And it says, when a non-hunting judge is not utilized, a hunting judge will be appointed to each cast. This person must have knowledge of the rules and be able to interpret and apply them in a fair manner. Authority of the judge begins when he is officially designated and receives the scorecard.
Yep, very self-explanatory, I believe, and that's the hunting judges is what we see most typically at most any event, for that matter, and even in the World Championships and bigger events. Especially in the first couple of rounds. Most of the guys that are there hunting, and but it is, even if you're using a hunting judge, and although we have voting procedures in place if we don't agree with the call. We hear it a lot, and it's kind of, and I hate to hear it, we're all judges. No, we're not all judges. There's one judge. All of us might have a say in it if we don't agree with something, but there still needs to be one person in charge. If everybody is just in charge, that generally just, it may sound good for a little while, but it generally doesn't work very well. But the hunting judge also needs to have knowledge of the rules and know how to apply them. And until they do that, they shouldn't accept the card if they're asked, to judge. But you know what? When they do, help us out, help the sport. If you're very knowledgeable, this and that, and they ask you why.
Take some pride in it.
Yep, take some pride that they're asking you to judge and do a good job of it.
Number 2 goes on to say, they will show no favors to any dog or hunter and will inform handlers of score and time recorded if requested.
Yeah, I don't think we need to add to that other than just, hey, you've got to, I think we've talked about this before, and we talk about it sometimes. You can be it's a competition, and you have your decisions can, they hold a lot of weight. Your decisions do. So to give your dog an unfair advantage, or give, to cater to your own dog, or make decisions that are in your favor, or work in your favor, I'm telling you, you can be in that position one time, but your integrity is also at stake out here. And it doesn't take me long to figure out if you're playing that card.
Rule 3 here is broken down into several different numbers. So it starts out by saying, if hunting judge scratches his dog, he should continue to judge the cast as a hunting judge. Do you want to touch on that at all?
Yeah, not other than, hey, the club assigned you as the hunting judge here. Like you said, take pride in it, do your job, and that is even if your dog is not doing well, you have to withdraw it, or it gets scratched, or finish the job. Stay with him.
The following procedure must be followed when using hunting judges. It says in 3.1 here, it says the host club must designate a hunting judge for each cast from the entries received. And then in parentheses, it says, see procedure for selecting hunting judges under Hunt Master Hunt Director guidelines, drawing casts.
Yeah, you're going to find that in the rule book outside of the running rules that we're discussing here. But it's and we approve of any draw procedure that is deemed fair and impartial. But there is one that that we would suggest, and it works really good, and it is obviously fair and impartial. But you can check that out in Hunt Master, Hunt Director Guidelines section of the rule book for drawing casts. But it is ultimately, it's the host club's responsibility to designate a hunting judge for each cast. In other words, we're not going to draw the cast and then decide, hey, give the card to you guys, and you guys decide who's going to be the hunting judge. No, should already be designated beforehand.
Rule 3.2 tells us the hunting judge has complete authority and is responsible for scoring all situations with exception to 3 situations only. And then you go as far as to tell them what those 3 situations are.
Yep. And before we go into those 3, I want to say this. Whether you have we talked about the hunting judge to begin with, or a non-hunting judge to begin with, they make all decisions. And it even mentioned, including the scoring of trees, plus, minus, circle, or whatever, calling timeout, all that. They make all those decisions. When you use a hunting judge, they also make all decisions. And if I don't agree with the decision the hunting judge uses, there's that procedure. The one is calling calling for a vote and and this and that. We're going to talk about that some more probably. But there are 3 situations that automatically go to a cast vote. And there's only 3. You're going to mention those right here.
Yeah, first one is scoring a tree, whether it's plus, minus, or circle. It says this does not include the decision on whether or not the squirrel could cross out to an adjoining tree or scoring multiple trees as one tree, or whether the game seen is a squirrel or off game. The hunting judge makes those decisions, but they may be questioned by a handler as outlined below in Rule 7.
Yeah, and basically what that is saying is, it's automatically going to go to a majority of the cast. If somebody sees a squirrel, somebody else has to see it. The majority has to see it before we can plus it. So that automatically goes to a majority of the cast. And it doesn't matter the judges, just because the judge saw the squirrel, that his doesn't hold any more weight than anybody else's. So whether it's the judge, as in a 3-dog cast, that means at least 2 of them have to see the squirrel. In order to plus it, it doesn't matter if it was the judge and 1 other person or the other 2 people, but it has to be a majority. So it automatically goes to a cast majority of the cast decision. And then the other one is to minus, plus or minus. Same thing there again. If let's say we don't see a squirrel in it, and there's rules that apply, within so many feet that we're going to talk about eventually here in the running rules of a den tree or this and that. Where there could be something, or there's just flat isn't no way a squirrel would be there, that you could minus the tree. And again, that's going to require a majority of the cast, not, and the judge's vote doesn't hold any more weight than anybody else's. So A is for, talks about that. But now that does not off game and things like that. So off game is a little bit differently. If we have off game in the tree, the judge is going to make that decision. He's going to say, hey, I have off game here, whatever that off game might be. Flying squirrels, for instance, you can't score on flying squirrels, but off game would be something like an opossum or maybe a raccoon or something like that in the tree. The judge is going to determine if it's that or a squirrel or what it is.
Right.
We might have something in the tree. You and I we're debating on what it is. What is that? That's not automatically going to go to a majority of the cast decision on what that is. The judge is going to determine what it is, whether he's right or wrong, and then we could question that. But as far as scoring plus, minus, or circle, that's automatically going to go to a majority of the cast. That's in A. So there's 3. So there's 1.
Yeah. Second one says calling timeout.
Calling timeout. Yep. Now we're talking about a hunting judge situation. Calling timeout, that's automatically going to go to a majority of the cast. And we need to look at the timeout section in the rule book to make sure we have a reason for calling timeout. And it's under one of those provisions that we can call timeout or vote to call timeout, but we got to have a majority to do so before we can.
Judge can't do it without that majority.
That's right. And there again, it doesn't matter the judge, whether his
vote holds the same weight as anybody else who's hunting in the cast.
Exactly.
And the third one is whether or not dogs are on a previously scored tree.
Yeah, the same way there. Sometimes we can't rescore a tree that's already been scored. There again, determining sometimes obviously usually it happened later and sometimes much later, but it doesn't really matter how much later or what have you. If we've already scored on this tree or this tree has already been scored at some point, we can't go back and score it again. Or maybe the squirrel's still there and some other dog trees on it or what have you, or the dog's tree on it later in the hunt. We've already scored it. We can't score it again. And there again, that decision of whether it's the same tree or not, judge's vote does not hold anything more than the others. So there's the 3 of them: scoring a tree, plus, minus, or circle. Number 2, calling timeout, or number 3, whether or not this tree we're on has already been previously scored. Those are the 3 things that automatically go to a cast vote. Again, beyond that, even the hunting judge will make the calls on everything else. And if we don't agree with it, we're going to go through the voting system. Now, I know sometimes it sounds friendly, I guess, if you're the judge, to maybe if they don't know how to score something, make the call. If I don't agree with it, I know what the procedure is, and we'll take that route. Make the call. Don't go to, I say sometimes, or a judge that's quick to poll everybody else or ask somebody else, hey, how would you score this? That generally doesn't turn out too well, and doesn't work too well. Just make the decision, and it's usually generally a sign of weakness, I guess, so to speak. But sometimes, sometimes we have situations. Judges do need to make tough calls sometimes. So I'm not criticizing or anything either. Make the call, and then we'll follow the procedures.
Yep. This next one here, number 3, is kind of a reiteration of something we've already seen in the handler section, but also pertains to judges here. And it tells you any cast members, though scratched, retain all voting privileges. And the exception, again, is if a handler is scratched for unsportsmanlike conduct, the handler loses all voting privileges.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. I think under Section 1 already, or at Section 1 or 2, I guess, but under handlers maybe. But yeah, even though scratched, handler still retains, scratched or withdrawn. They're talking about their dog. They retain all voting privileges as far as if they're asked upon, and they need to. Now, the one thing I will add here is, let's say you have withdrawn and you have removed yourself from it. You've taken your dog back or whatever, and you're no longer part of the cast for 30 minutes or what have you. You don't come back in again. Don't jumping back and forth just because it's handy or not handy. Stay with the cast or don't. And obviously we've already talked about that. You should stay with the cast. And the only exception would be if you got scratched for unsportsmanlike conduct, then just leave.
The next one here says, in the event only one cast member remains in the hunt, handler must return to the hunt master or hunt director for a non-hunting judge to complete cast. Deadline may be extended if necessary for this cast only.
Yep, and we've already talked about it in this series to where if there's only one dog in the hunt or one dog remaining, then that dog must have a non-hunting judge if it's the only one. The exception to that is if we have cast members that were a part of that cast earlier. That's why they retain their voting privileges. And even though 2 of the 3 dogs are scratched, as long as those handlers stay or a handler stays with them, then they can continue on with the hunt. Otherwise, if nobody stays with them, then this individual needs to go back, get a non-hunting judge assigned to the cast to finish it. And they can't just assume, or they don't have the authority again to, let's say there's a spectator with them, to make him a non-hunting judge. This individual needs to be assigned by the event official. So that means they have to go back, won't have any other choice. And for that reason, the hunt director or the hunt master may extend the return deadline for this cast only. There's also a good reason for to stay with the cast. Don't put an individual, make them do all that, and even if sometimes, generally when that happens, when everybody leaves because somebody's a little disgruntled, but I don't know. I think it just goes a long way. Even if you think something wasn't done right or whatever, don't just be I don't know, a little third grade-ish or elementary and just pack up my toys and leave, because I'm mad, and put them in a position like that. It's not very nice. And if you're not careful, it might fall under unsportsmanlike conduct.
Yeah, another thing to think about is that could be you.
Yep, exactly right. Exactly.
Next one here says, should a situation arise where a handler questions a call that was made or a call that should have been made but wasn't, that handler may ask to have his question voted on by all cast members that remain with the cast at that time.
So here's where we go, the difference between a non-hunting judge and having a hunting judge. So the first step, if I don't agree with the call that's made, I'm going to ask for a cast vote at this point. Whether it was a situation where I don't agree with a call, or it might be a situation where there's no call being made where I think a call needs to be made. My first step is then and there that I say, hey, Judge, I don't agree with the call here. I'd like to ask for a cast vote. And then that's when a cast vote should ensue right then and there, and not 20 minutes later, 5 minutes later, or whatever later on. Right then and there is when that's the first step.
Moving on to 6 here, tells us majority of cast rules. Each handler must vote or their dog will be scratched.
I think majority cast rules. So we talked about that with a hunting judge. It's going to take a majority to overturn the master or the judge's decision. In this case, in a 3-dog cast, the other handler would have to agree with me that and if that's the case, if that's the way the other handler votes, 2-1 over the judge, then the ruling is going to switch the other way. And if somebody's still not satisfied with that, they can ask to put a question mark on it. But here's one point I want to make about this part right here. So sometimes it says something. It says here that let me see where the majority cast rule. Each handler must vote, or their dog will be scratched. So let's say you didn't see it. I'm asking you for your vote, Trevor. You didn't see it, or you don't have an opinion one way or another. Well, the way the hunts are set up and the way the rules are set up, you have no choice. So maybe you don't. If it's a situation where you didn't see it, how is it fair? That might bring up the question: why am I asked to vote on this when I didn't see it? How can I vote on it? And that's a fair question, I think. So how do I vote? Do I vote in favor of the dog maybe, or how do I? But here's the theory that I've always tried to use or suggest is if the judge made their call, they were assigned by the club, number one, because they trust them, that they know the rules and they trust their integrity, this and that. So that should play a part in it. So why am I, if I didn't see it or have nothing to strongly argue against it, why am I going to vote against the way the judge did? So if you need an answer for that, then unless I see something outside of the way the judge voted or ruled on it, then why go against him? Even if it's something I didn't see, and I have to vote. So there's something to think about when it comes to that.
Number 6 continues by saying if majority decision is not reached, the call stands as it was scored by the judge. Any handler that is not satisfied with the majority of cast decision retains the right to place a question mark on the card and present his question to the hunt master or hunt director panel.
Yep, and now we're going into kind of a repeat of what we talked about earlier with the non-hunting judge. So now we've got a question on the scorecard. We're going to take it back, and we don't take it back until after. And then it talks about, the panel in number 7. If the matter has not been satisfactorily resolved by the decision of the hunt master, a panel may be formed for a fee. And that's also the first step, again, when you're utilizing hunt director format. If still not satisfied, the appeal procedure must be followed and must be filed immediately after the panel has made their ruling and is accompanied by a $20 fee. So that's just repetitive of what we already talked about there at the end of the hunting judges. So yeah, that's the differences there between the hunting judge and the non-hunting judge, and you know what, they work pretty well.
That's right. Follow the procedures. We're bound by those too.
Yep.
If you follow them, we'll get the resolution for you, and we'll get the call right.
Yep. And the reason there are procedures in place like this because we also do want to have it right. And sometimes judges are also human. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they just don't know. Sometimes they have to make those tough calls. Make the call. Don't be looking around for, hey, how would you do it? Because that's probably why you have a question to begin with, is somebody doesn't agree with it. So obviously you're not going to probably get the same. Just make the call and as a handler, let the judges do their job and make those calls. And then if you don't agree with it, why, it's not a bad thing to ask for a question sometimes. If because you do want to get it right, just do it the right way.
That's right.
So I think that's a very important section of the rule book right there. But hopefully brought some clarity to it.
Yeah, and then real quick, we'll talk about the guide portion of it, which is just one bullet point here, and it says, a guide is willing to take a cast to a location where they can hunt safely and has permission. Any member of the cast, be it non-hunting judge, hunting judge, or handler, may be a guide.
Yep, and the club selects those guides, and just a couple things, just because I put down a guide or offered a guide doesn't mean I'm going to be granted to guide. That's the club's decision. They may look at a couple different things or reasons why they choose somebody, and just because they choose or don't choose me, it doesn't really matter. That's up to them. and I can make any arguments I want about that, why they should consider me, but that really doesn't matter. But if I am asked to guide, I should be responsible about that and take you guys or my cast to where I have permission. The last thing you guys want to see is we be out here at this place where I don't have permission. Heaven forbid the landowner comes out, and now we've got a situation that we should not be in. Don't put anybody in that situation. And number one or number two, it's not very sportsmanlike, anyways. So, yeah, make sure you have a place where place I'm going to take you. Your dog shouldn't be in jeopardy. I'm not worried about busy roads and things like that. We're going to have a good hunt.
Absolutely. Well said. Rule 4, which pertains to spectators. And we'll start out with Rule 4A, which reads, the hunt director will discuss and announce if spectators will be allowed on casts, if agreeable with the majority of cast members. Spectators should be allowed to accompany the cast if possible.
Yeah, it's good to have spectators. Oftentimes there's especially in the sport of squirrel hunting or whatever, sometimes you have kids, or maybe it's friends or family members just want to see your dog go, or what have you, or be a part of it somehow, even though they don't have a dog in the hunt. Why, it's a good thing to allow spectators. But and most events do allow spectators, maybe depending on what it is, for whatever reason. Maybe there might be a reason that, and maybe a good reason why spectators aren't allowed. And sometimes you got to consider this too. Sometimes a landowner does not want a lot of folks on their property. Sure. That's maybe one of them. So if I have to guide and I have no choice but to this place I'm going to take you, the landowner absolutely wants, very few people on it and doesn't want a lot of people. So we allow up to 3 spectators, and B is going to talk about allowing 3 spectators up to per person. So there's 3 of us on a cast. That would be potentially be up to 9 more people, like a dozen people on his property, and that may just be too much. But that may be a reason why no spectators are allowed, because, hey, I have a situation here where we can't allow spectators. That's going to be decided before you go out to hunt, and if it's allowed, the section B says there shall be no more than 3 spectators allowed per handler on any one cast unless otherwise agreed upon by the remaining cast members. So sometimes I think you want to be, for reasons we just talked about or whatever. But if let's say I have 4 of them, nobody else has any spectators. Generally, it's not going to be a problem. But it needs to be approved by everybody else. And one of those is a big part of that is just that we don't have too many people out where we're hunting at.
Yeah, being reasonable and considerate it can go a long ways.
Yep.
Rule 4C says handlers shall be responsible for the conduct of spectators accompanying them on casts. Handler's dog will be scratched for rules violations by their spectators.
Yeah, and handlers cannot get involved with any scoring discussions or discrepancies. It doesn't matter what they think or, anything like that. Or maybe sometimes you'll have a handler that is, or a spectator that is actually more versed on the rules and knows something is not getting done right. You and I have been in those situations, and I've been in world hunts where I'm walking along and thinking, this is not right. This is not right. But you know what? Well, I have to keep my mouth shut. I'm just a spectator. A spectator is just an observer.
Right.
And I don't get involved in any discussions or anything like that. And if I do, whoever I'm spectating with, I'm putting them in jeopardy of their dog getting scratched for it.
And a continuation of that, basically, Rule 4D tells us spectators must follow the directions of the judges and hunt director, hunt master.
Yeah, and that's just some simple little things that maybe would, depending on what the situation is in the woods or whatever, follow the judge, or the judge is in charge, and the hunt director or hunt master as far as before they release you and all this and that. But when you get to the woods, the judge is in charge. You must follow their directions at all times. So yeah, this is a section here where it's necessary to have it in the rule books, kind of have a guideline for spectators and such. Although it's pretty short, but spectators are always welcome.
That's right,
always welcome, and 95% of the time you're going to get to go on a cast.
Alan, I know we both have new Dogtra Pathfinder 2s. How are you liking yours so far?
I'm liking it. I've even had the opportunity now to use mine where I didn't have service, where I download the map of that area, and it works flawlessly. Love it.
I agree. I really like my Dogtra Pathfinder 2 as well. I've used it quite a bit the past few months. I really like the crystal clear maps. I like that it doesn't lose service very much, and I don't have many bad things to say about it at all. Dogtra Pathfinder 2, the official GPS collar partner of UKC. Thank you for listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast. Be sure to give us a follow so you don't miss any of our new episodes or content.